Recorded live from the secret underground lair of Crimson Cowl Comics and Collectibles, this is the Crimson Cowl Comic Club Podcast.
The following issues may contain spoilers. Welcome to a very special Crimson Cowl creator interview. I'm Anthony.
I'm David.
I'm Kirby.
Welcome to this special interview with a comic creator. We are joined here by Brandon Ingram from Dismay Comics. How's it going, Brandon?
Doing pretty good. Thank you guys for having me.
Excellent. What we're going to do in this interview here, you're here to advertise a brand new Kickstarter, which by the time this is released has a couple of days left. But the good thing is that you are fully funded. So that is definitely an exciting thing going into this interview here, knowing that the project has been funded. Now we can just try to see if we can bump that up a little bit and stretch goals and all that fun stuff. So what we're going to do in this interview here is before we get to advertising that, we want to learn more about Brandon. So we have a couple questions that we usually do to kind of get to know our guest a little bit. And you had mentioned off air about being a big comic fan, and that's definitely well embraced when it comes to Crimson Cowl Comic Club here. And so we want to know kind of basically your earliest memory with discovering comic books, whether it's a memory of like seeing in a supermarket or being given, finding on your own, or if it was handed down to you. Basically, how did you find comics as a reader?
Kind of the first comics I got was me and my mom used to go yard selling a lot when I was young. And we went to a yard sale and there was a shoebox full of like Marvel, DC, Valiant, like a bunch of stuff from like 70s to early 90s. And I pretty much just tore through in terms of reading those books because it was like uh, uh, Amazing Spider-Man, there's Adventures of Superman, then like more lesser known stuff like DP7 from Marvel, as well as some of the Valiant stuff that was there, and got into reading that like because ultimately those were like part five of a 10-part arc basically. Like I didn't have the context before that arc, as well as like once I read through it, it's not like I could just go to a comic shop right after and pick up the rest of the arc. So I was just kind of stuck with that. But at that young of an age, I was 7 or 8, like I enjoyed it a lot. Like even though it was just the middle of a story and I didn't have the beginning or the end, it was at least for me a good way to get into comics. And then from there, like it was around high school, the New 52 was like starting to take off. It was starting to be big. And a friend of mine gave me the volume one of Batman New 52. It was the Court of Owls one. I got that. I read through it. I was like, holy crap, like this is really good. And then that was one of the first times that I went into a comic shop, picked up like the next volume, which was Night of Owls. And then after that, like periodically kept up with like serialized comics, like picking up the floppies afterwards. So that was kind of my introduction into comics and have been a part of it ever since, basically.
Yeah, you and I share that with the yard sales and especially the shoebox. That's where I kept all my comics, and I still have all my comics from being a kid. Where I put all my Caspers and my Richie Rich and Archies and stuff like that. But yeah, I had that same thing too with mostly with Detective Comics, where I could have issue 637 and 38, but I wouldn't have the next couple. But that wouldn't stop me from reading it. So that's always fun
Exactly.
to kind of just see where you like it enough, and you even to the point where you don't even care that you have the consecutive chapters. So
Oh yeah, yeah. It also just kind of showed, at least with that time, which there's still stories that are written like this today. At least with that time, how uh, it's the classic Stan Lee line. It seems like a lot of comic writers kind of followed it, whereas like everyone's comic is someone's first, and so a lot of writers would kind of write in that, like yes, like it's part five of a story, but ultimately 7-year-old me could pick up that part five of the story and it's my essentially first comic in that series, and I was able to just ultimately keep going with the story and not be that confused.
And we see a good example of that with your Kickstarter comic. With it, we'll talk about that in later on in the show. But the idea that you don't have to read the other two issues from this world that you've created, so you can definitely see that you learned a lot from that, and because it's very very new reader friendly is for your Kickstarter one. You talked about some of the characters and books and series that you follow, but anything real specific overall when it comes to like what kind of genres you really like? You mentioned a lot of superhero stuff, but just overall, what's your genre and like your biggest characters that are your top favorite characters?
So I do like superhero stuff, but I also like the indie stuff, like mainstream indie stuff, like Boom Studios Image, as well as like indie stuff, like Kickstarter stuff or stuff you find at conventions. But the big two, like DC, Marvel, I'm more of a DC guy than a Marvel guy when it comes to comics. Like I do like a decent bit of Marvel comics, but I just kept up with DC comics more. My favorite overall superhero character that I like to read and find the next best story of is like Superman. Like Superman's my favorite character. I absolutely love Superman, and I like whenever I hear of, because I don't really buy floppies from the big two anymore. I'll pick up the trades. But whenever I hear of like, oh, this is the next big Superman story, I'm like, ooh, like I'm gonna get that, or I'm gonna save up for that, or I'm gonna tell someone, hey, Christmas time, get me this or whatever. Because yeah, the next one I really want to read is Philip Kennedy Johnson's little run on Superman, where it was Superman in War World. I really want to read that because it's interesting. It's essentially Superman meets Gladiator. Uh, but yeah, I like a lot of characters like Batman. Everyone has read Batman and likes a Batman comic, at least one Batman comic. I like Batman, but as I got older, I leaned more towards Superman and liking Superman a lot more. Because it's one of those things where, like, when I think about my top 25 comics or graphic novels of all time, in my top 25, there's no Batman stuff. There's at least two Superman books in that top 25, though. So it's just one of those things where I just like Superman more. And I will say, for those that do like Superman, what's it? All Star Superman is really good. I'd say top five, if not top three, Superman stories for me. Me personally, like my own personal opinion, it's not my favorite Superman story though. It's probably top three. I think Superman Up in the Sky by Tom King is
Yeah.
honestly better. I really like that book. Um, but I don't know. There's a ton of Superman stuff that's really good. That the the mass of people who hear about Superman nowadays see him as boring, fuddy-duddy, like Boy Scout. It's like you've never read a Superman comic. Like you've never read one clearly. You just saw The Boys, or you just read Injustice or heard about that, where it's like the only way to make Superman interesting is to turn as if he's evil. Good concept. Not saying you can't do that. Like Injustice, very interesting story. The Boys, very interesting story. Those aren't Superman though. So whenever people's like, that's what you have to do to make Superman like meaningful in any way, it's like, no, read Superman. You'll see.
Cool.
Yeah, I noticed that was a heavy influence on you because last night I did a deep dive going through your Instagram. There's lots of Superman stuff in there. Have you checked out Superman Space Age from Allred
No,
yet?
I want to. Yeah, that's on my
I'm not a
list. Like
big
I'll probably.
Superman. I'm not a big Superman fan, but that brought me back to the early Superman that I enjoyed. So I really
Yeah.
liked that one.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but
I'll have to
good
check that
things
one out
about
too.
it. It's on my list. Like I'll probably get it by the end of this year.
Yeah, that's definitely a recommended one from our club here. I have one more go-to question about you. While I do that, so David and Kirby, if you had any questions for Brandon, we can cycle those in. But basically, talking about where did your interest of writing develop? Like, was that an early age? Was it later in adult life? Kind of let us know where writing came into your life.
Me actually getting interested in writing came after high school. I thought it just kind of like randomly appeared, but then like retrospectively I look back and realized that there were periods like in my life in elementary school, middle school, high school where I liked writing at some point, or I was writing at some point, but just didn't realize it. Um, but when I got like really serious about writing, it was pretty much right after high school. I was writing a bunch of screenplays. Like right after high school, it was just like short film screenplays, like mostly horror stuff at the time, and then eventually it broadened to more than just horror, and then eventually it broadened to more than just a short film. It was like feature length screenplays, and then eventually writing for comics. It was a slow progression, but yeah, I started writing comics. Trying to think around early 2018, around that time. That's when I started writing for comics.
And we'll talk about the Gallows Man and Tales from Town City. But are those? Have you written any other comics, or are those just so you do have a back catalog that you've been doing them?
Yeah, like I've got Gallows Man, which that whole series is done. It's a 4 issue miniseries, but we're working on issue 3 and 4. But the Gallows Man, Tales from Town City, I've got a few issues of that written. Dismay Avenue is a horror series I have. Like issues 1 and 2 of that have already been put out, and hope planning to have at least 3 and 4 have those come out next year or the year after. But those are the ones I have written and are like actively publishing. But there's stuff that I have written that I probably won't put out through Dismay Comics, but will try to put out through maybe a different publisher, because the stuff that I'm talking about is like it's 6 issues or more, and I don't want to really be doing Kickstarters for that to where people are waiting like
Yeah.
basically 3 to 5 years for this series to wrap or whatever. I want a publisher who can put it out every other month or once a month, that sort of thing. So there is other stuff I'm writing, but yeah.
Cool, cool. So yeah, we'll throw it over to David and Kirby. We'll start with Kirby there, and if you had any questions for Brandon.
Get the mute thing off there. Everybody I asked the same first question to, and that's I want to know what your very first published, either a letter to an editor or a picture that you sent to someone or a school newspaper, something that your first thing you had published that you can remember.
So the very first thing, this leads back to when I had said I look back retrospectively and realized that I did enjoy writing early on in life. It wasn't just after high school. Um, I had like they had some sort of program at my school to where like you could write a story and then like you could get it published. Like essentially they would print it in a hardback book and you could have it pretty much. And the thing I wrote, it was called Danny's Journal. I was 10 years old. It was Danny's Journal, and I remember writing it in like one of those little notepads that like flip, and the cover of it was like a bunch of smiley faces. And I just wrote Danny's Journal on that. I wrote the story in that, and I'm 10 years old, plus I'm left-handed, so my handwriting's awful. So when it came to the publishing part, I had to get my mom to basically rewrite it, like look at the journal and rewrite it on the actual pages that would be published. The reason that is bad slash important to this is Danny's Journal was essentially a ripoff of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I was 10 years old. So my mom is reading all of the stuff her 10-year-old wrote that is like very, very questionable. I'd be a little worried if I was her at that time.
Yeah.
Um,
Or
but
she stuff up.
and another thing is like she's an artist, so I also she's amazing for the support she had here. She also did illustration, so she would like write a page, like write a page from what I written, and then like illustrate it, or I'd describe like, hey, like illustrate this or whatever. Some great illustrations, but also it's like, yeah, like a 10-year-old writing this stuff is a little bit odd, as well as the mom is seeing everything the 10-year-old wrote. That is basically Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So that's the first published thing I remember writing. And like 3 or 4 years ago, I actually was going through the attic and found the 2 copies of Danny's journal. So I've got those. I revisited it like last year and I was like, oh boy.
So
Oh,
those
you gotta publish those. Put them on.
I was gonna say you throw them on as a Kickstarter backer reward, you know,
Yeah.
something, get, you know, 1 of 2 copies of Danny's journal.
Yep.
We'll jump over to David.
All right. So you're doing a Kickstarter. You've done Kickstarters prior to this. What do you find to be like the biggest hurdle, aside from just getting people to donate to the cause? What's the biggest hurdle for you in running a successful Kickstarter campaign?
It ultimately boils down to marketing. Because if you're a creator, like you should love writing or art or whatever you are like creative at. Like I love the writing process. I love working with an artist. I love editing the books. Um, I love all that stuff, and I do like marketing. But it's one of those things where, like, even though this is my fifth Kickstarter I've ran, it's still like still constantly learning. Like I still feel like a newbie at it. It's one of those things where when it does work, like whatever I'm attempting or trying, when it does work, it's like kind of satisfying where it's like, finally, I figured it out. And then the next thing you post or you send out or whatever it is, it's essentially that same style, but it's like got no traction at all. It's like, oh, okay. So it's just randomness. It's just random fluke things when it comes to marketing. That's the frustrating part is marketing, just trying to figure out what works and what doesn't. Because one day something works, then the very next day that thing doesn't work. So I would say marketing's probably the biggest obstacle for me.
So have you had any of these that were not successful?
My very first Kickstarter actually wasn't successful. This
Danny's
was back
journal.
in do it.
Danny's journal.
Dance. Yeah. Back in 2020, I actually tried launching Dismay Avenue #1 on Kickstarter, and the reason it failed is all my fault because I just didn't know what it took to actually run a Kickstarter. Like I wasn't reaching out like to podcast or YouTube shows. I wasn't sending review copies to websites and stuff. And another thing, this just shows how much I didn't know about running a Kickstarter. I waited like a week into the Kickstarter to actually reach out to friends and family about like, hey, I got this thing going on. Come check it out. For anyone out there that has never ran a Kickstarter, don't do that. When it comes to friends and family, let them know a month before the Kickstarter, let them know a week before the Kickstarter, let them know the day before the Kickstarter, let them know the day of the Kickstarter, and then let them know like a week or 48 hours before the Kickstarter ends. Don't wait until you're midway through your Kickstarter. Be like, hey guys, like I got this thing going. So yeah, it was not successful. I learned a ton from the many mistakes from that failed Kickstarter. It's one of those things where I could have given up, whatever, but ultimately I had the comics done. It was like issue 1 of Dismay Avenue, issue 2 of Dismay Avenue. I had them done to where it's like I'm gonna do this. I just have to learn. And so I got all the feedback, realized like some of the mistakes I had made, and just applied that to the next one. And the next one was Gallows Man #1 Kickstarter, and that was successful. And even though like the first one was a failure and the next one was successful, doesn't mean there weren't mistakes made in the second one. There's even to this day, even with Tales from Town City, there are mistakes that are made, but it's ultimately learning from each project's mistakes and just lessening the amount of mistakes as it goes on, or at least learning from those mistakes and correcting it or applying it to the next Kickstarter.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, sometimes making the mistakes can be the best teacher.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
also helpful to have a podcast and interview people who are doing Kickstarters and ask them questions about Kickstarters.
yeah,
No, yeah.
and not letting a first failure out stop you. Like you said, you could have just given up, but you had the work done, and you said you realized like, well, I'm already doing this, so it's good that otherwise we wouldn't be talking today, and we wouldn't have had some laughs reading your comics. So
Thank you. Thank you.
good. Any other questions for Brandon specifically before we actually move on to the Kickstarter promotion? All right, we'll jump right into it. So we're here to talk about Tales from Town City. This is issue #1. This comic is set in the 1940s. It is a satirically over-the-top and campy world of superheroes. This series is a spin-off from the well-acclaimed The Gallows Man miniseries. It follows the day-to-day ventures of some of the minor characters that were introduced in The Gallows Man. Each issue of Tales from Town City consists of multiple self-contained stories of figures within Town City itself. I do have the lineup of credits here. So we have 3 short stories, and this is the combination of names that all contributed. We have Brandon Ingram, Juan Romero, which I do want to take a little pause there because after seeing a sloth character in the
Yeah, slowpokes.
yes,
Yeah,
so that is actually how we met. I assume came from Steve Urena.
yeah.
We'll touch back on Juan Romero in a second. Nikki Powers, Helen Bolton, and there's a variant cover by Thomas Tikas. So this here is a first issue is 32 pages in length and follows homeless villains trying to use their expired coupons, super animals slaughtering poachers, and a mortician trying to make sense of dead villains' names. So what we're going to do here is show our audience the trailer that you have up on Kickstarter.
Spinning straight from the pages of The Gallows Man comes a brand new series of tales. Not tales as in what furries wish they had behind them, but rather the story type of tales, like what you would find in a comic book. Speaking of which, this is an ad for Tales from Town City #1. This anthology series follows lesser-known characters that were introduced in the Gallows Man miniseries. Characters like Hypno Ray and the Rusty Hook. You'll follow these 2 homeless villains and their ventures into trying to use expired coupons they found. Or characters like Hangmutt as this super-heroic dog and his team of super animals slaughter poachers on the daily. And there's even more characters that you'll just have to wait and see for yourself. Now I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, well, if Tales from the Town City spins off from the Gallows Man series, do I need to read the Gallows Man to get Tales from the Town City? The answer is no, you silly listener. You don't need to read the Gallows Man to enjoy the stories found within Tales from the Town City. Each issue and story found within Tales from Town City is self-contained. So what are you waiting for? Support Tales from Town City #1 by backing it on Kickstarter today. Why has it come to this? I mean, how the hell did Gallows Man do well enough to warrant a spin-off? Why did I even take this gig? I mean, they had me read a dumb little ad and then force me to say things like, "My name is Jeff," and, ice cream, so good, gang gang. Like, when is it enough if I said, "Shout out to Little Big Toe, keep it 100G"? Would that be enough to satiate their hunger? Or would I have to humiliate myself and say something as repulsive as, I do declare there is feces running down my pants as we speak? When will it be enough? I may never know.
So there you have it. The one thing I wanted to compliment you was how hilarious the Kickstarter trailer was for this campaign. Now, I've backed probably nearly 100 projects, and I wouldn't say I'm laughing at any of the, just giving me the information, being like, oh, this is what the project is. But the one person I can kind of compare it to is artist Ryan Brown from God Hates Astronauts, 8 Billion Genies, Curse Words, and he is just one of the most funny, like, comic book personalities I've ever come across. And the energy that you gave in that trailer gave me a lot of that similar comedic tones of Ryan Brown. So I guess my first question is if you had any comedic inspirations, whether it's within comic books or just comedy in general for other mediums, can you talk about that at all?
Yeah, I'll first mention inspirations outside of comics in terms of comedy. I really like stand up. That it doesn't fully apply to comics, but ultimately, when it comes to jokes and pacing of jokes and punchlines, that can always apply. I'm a huge fan of Norm Macdonald. I really like Norm Macdonald. He's hilarious. I still go back and listen to some of the stuff nowadays. Norm Macdonald. I like Tom Segura. Tom Segura is pretty funny. Shane Gillis, kind of a newer comedian. He's pretty funny. So those are some comedian inspirations. There's other comedians that I listen to and enjoy, but those are some of the biggest ones. When it comes to now not stand up, but still not fully comics, a little bit comics. Kevin Smith is, I'd say, a pretty big inspiration. Like I like most of Kevin Smith stuff. There's some stuff I don't like. Like I personally don't like Mallrats. I don't think it's that great of a movie, but I love Clerks. I love the Clerks trilogy. I really like Clerks. And there's a lot of stuff I like, as well as whenever he goes into like weird horror stuff, like with Tusk or I forgot what the other one is, like Red State. Yeah, Red State. Yeah. Um, it's interesting to see. And then as a comic writer, he's pretty decent. Like he has some misses here and there, but he's pretty decent. When it comes to comedy, like specifically dialogue based comedy, because that's what he's really known for, is in Clerks, not a lot of action happens. Ultimately, it's conversations. And it was essentially like podcast before podcast, essentially. And I really like that, to where like a series I'm currently writing is literally a like the main influence is the Clerks movies, where it is a lot of that conversational comedy and stuff. But yeah, like those are some big inspirations. When it comes to comic books, I really like Matt Fraction. Matt Fraction's a pretty good comedic writer, as well as like it's not just comedy. Like he can warp comedy with action, with emotion very well. Like with his Hawkeye series, like he did that very well. Trying to think, there's another. Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. He also wrote that. That was a really good 12-issue series. Matt Fraction, and then what's his name? Oh, Nick Spencer. I
Yes.
know everyone knows him as the action guy, but he can actually write comedy pretty well. He doesn't do it often because they want him to do the big superhero action stuff. But he wrote a comic for Image back in like 2017 called The Fix.
Yes.
And me personally, it's one of the funniest comics I've read. The thing that sucks is it's on hiatus. Ultimately, it's canceled. I don't see him ever going back to it. But it's been on hiatus for like 5 years. But one of the funniest comics, like the first issue, there were 2 times where I laughed out loud, like actually laughed out loud. So Nick Spencer's a pretty good comedy writer. The issue is, whenever he was writing that, that's when Secret Secret Empire came out.
Yep.
So that drew his attention, and then all the stuff that followed to where like some of this stuff like the fix he kind of had to drop. As well as Superior Foes of Spider-Man. Like that was really funny. So those are some of the inspirations for like comedy writing.
Good. And now you did advertise that you don't have to have read The Gallows Man to enjoy this issue, and I can be someone who can support that message because I have your you know gracious enough to give us a PDF copy, so we got to read it. And yeah, we didn't have to read it, but there is an option on the Kickstarter to get those copies. So if there's anybody listening and watching that also wants to dive into the Gallows Man, can you kind of give us a synopsis, elevator pitch on what that series is?
Yeah, so the Gallows Man, best way to describe it is 1960s Adam West Batman meets Inglorious Bastards. Like that is the Gallows Man, because it's set in the 1940s. Gallows Man and his sidekick Newsboy, who's basically his Robin sidekick, they are beating up and killing Nazis, all while like having the fun jovialness of Adam West Batman. Like, let's get them, chum. Like just the like gee willikers, Gallows Man, like stuff like that. It's a lot of fun. So yeah, Tales from Town City spins off from that with minor characters from that.
And so one of your artists is Juan Romero. And once I saw that sloth, I'm like, okay, I recognize that art style. Now, how did you find Juan Romero? Is it through a friendship, or have you seen Slowpokes prior? How did that? How did he get attached to the project?
It was ultimately me being a fan of Slowpokes. Like I had got Slowpokes 1, I got Slowpokes 2, really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed Juan's art of just the crazy violence and stuff, and really liked it to where whenever I was writing the stories for Tales from Town City, there was the Fierce Pet story, and like from the very beginning I knew that story was going to be like just crazy over the top violence of these animal slaughtering poachers. And I remembered Slowpokes and I was like, I've seen Juan literally do animals killing humans comedically, like with sloth. So I was like, that was essentially his portfolio. Like you don't have to show me anything. It's like I know the guy can do that very well and very funny. To where I had reached out to him about Fierce Pets and hired him for that. And in the process of hiring from that, I looked at some of his other work as well as I went back to Slowpokes and saw that not just the crazy animal killing humans violence was comedic, but he could also do uh, uh, dialogue, like specifically like just people having conversations and facial emotions. He could do that very well because that's a major thing with like the first story of this, like the two homeless villains trying to use expired coupons. Not a lot of action is happening in that. It's mostly conversation based. And I noticed that Juan can do facial emotions and reactions very well. And that's what you need for something like that that's mostly dialogue based.
And now I could see the Kevin Smith influence through that first story, just because it is very dialogue heavy and back and forth and jokes and this and that. So I could see that now. One other question I have lined up here, and then we'll open it up if there's any questions about Tales from Town City. What led you to? Oh, and what I'll do once I ask this, I will start putting up some preview pages. You don't have to talk about them. I'm just going to put them on the screen as we're
Yeah.
talking. What made you decide to do the spin-off thing rather than kind of keeping them within the town, having not read The Gallows Man, rather than like just throwing them into a little bit of more issues of Gallows Man? So was there something that led you to be like, all right, this needs its own spin-off issue?
It was ultimately kind of two things. So I couldn't really do with the Gallows Man, like keeping them in the Gallows Man series, because that's going to be a 4-issue miniseries, and that's very much focused on the Gallows Man himself and Newsboy as well, the Gallows Man and Newsboy. So I couldn't really fit in more page time for some of these characters. also, in making issue 2 of The Gallows Man, this is where Tales from Town City originated. It originated from a mistake I made in The Gallows Man #2. When I was making that, the comic printer company I use print by increments of 4. So 4 pages, 8 pages, 12 pages. They print in that order. I got done with The Gallows Man #2, and I forgot that we added some more pages to it to have the pacing go well. To where when we got to the end, in the Gallows Man comics, I like to have like 2 or 3 pages of just behind the scenes stuff, like, oh, like here's where this originated, that sort of stuff. Just me talking basically in those. And I only had like 1 page to do that. So I was like, oh crap, like am I just gonna do 1 page of that or add another 4-page increment? So ultimately added another 4-page increment, uh, did my behind the scenes stuff, and I still had 2 pages to fill. Like I needed 2 pages to fill. So I ultimately just wrote a 2-page short about Newsboy. Basically like him at his house or at his apartment with his mom. And just a funny little story of him having a dream and like what he dreams about basically. And once I was done writing that, once I was done making that, I realized like crap, like I want to do more of these, like more of these like little short stories from other characters that aren't the Gallows Man to kind of flesh out the world a little bit and flesh out these characters a little bit. And so it started from that mistake. And then I ultimately had a list and I was like, I want to write about this character, this character, this character. It'll be a one shot. It'll be a 40, 50 page one shot. Then I was actually writing all those stories and I was like, oh crap. Like this is not going to be a one shot. This is going to be like 3 to 4 issues because there's so many characters I want to write about because each issue will focus on different characters with Tales from Town City. So yeah, it Tales from Town City basically started from a mistake I made in The Gallows Man #2.
But
Excellent.
it's funny because these really remind me like if you had, Gallows Man as say like an ongoing series, like a lot of comics used to commonly have these backup stories, and that's kind of what these are.
Yeah,
It's like it's almost having the collection of the backup stories,
yeah, yeah. That's what I kind of like to have with it is like because with this this issue right here, like the longest story is 16 pages with the Fierce Pets one. Then there's a 12-page story, a 4-page story. The future issues will feel more like that classic comic where it's like a 22-page story or a 28-page story and then like a 5 or 6-page backup. But this one I kind of wanted to have the most in terms of an anthology because I also wanted to have it work well where these 3 stories could be placed. Because if I place these 3 stories, like took one out and placed it in another issue with another story, it didn't really work. To where these 3, I think, work fairly well because it's an odd progression, but I do like the progression where it's basically dialogue based humor with the homeless villains and then also with the mortician like burning the dead bodies, like he's just ranting about these villains names, just like yours makes sense, yours makes no sense, like that sort of stuff. And then the last story is where you have your like action gruesome violence kind of, so it like ramps to that kind of.
Cool. And yeah, if David or Kirby have any questions, feel to jump in about Tales from Town City.
You can basically, I love the way this is laid out. I'm big on the new everybody doing the black, white, and red stories, black, white, gold, black, white, and blue, having the nice little mini stories in there that are actually nice and complete. Like you said, you can pick it up, be fresh on it, and not have to go back to everything else to understand what you're reading. Now, this is from other stories, but I was curious with your Kickstarter. I've been searching for Dismay Avenue and I don't know where to buy it. Are you going to add make that an add-on in the end with the Kickstarter, something you can throw into your?
So with Dismay Avenue 1 and 2, it's in the add-on section. So once you click the tier section, then those are in the add-on, including the variant covers and stuff for Dismay Avenue.
Okay, nice. And then is this gonna lead into curbsided, or is curbsided kind of set off to the side?
Curbsided is like its own thing. It won't be in it's like its own universe kind of.
Okay, that's not part of this whole universe.
Yeah.
then.
Curbsided will pretty much take place like our time, if not like mid 2000s kind of.
All right. Nice. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm enjoying writing it. I still have a couple more stories, like since the Kickstarter started, or even before the Kickstarter, I had to like kind of take a break from writing it because just getting the Kickstarter in order and then doing a Kickstarter. But once the Kickstarter's done, those last two stories, I'll write those, then work on some more writing projects. And once that's finished, I'm going to find an artist to basically do issue 1 of that, and then I'll try to pitch it to some publishers.
Cool. As if there's any other questions, feel free to jump in. While we do that, I want to talk about some of the Kickstarter rewards. I do have some pictures to go along with it. So you will be offering a T-shirt. But yeah, if you want to go down the line, I'm just going to start throwing in the pictures. If you can let everybody know what kind of rewards you can get.
Yeah, so essentially it's the reward tiers range from $1 to $75, really like a reward tier for any budget, essentially. If you just want to read Tales from Town City #1 and you don't care to have it physically, you can get Tales from Town City #1 digitally for just $5. You can get Tales from Town City #1, Gallows-Man #1, Gallows-Man #2, all 3 of those for $12 digitally. It's over 130 pages of comics. Physical copy of Tales from Town City starts at $10. And then from there, there's the T-shirt. The T-shirt's $19 plus shipping. I ultimately, when it comes to making the T-shirts, I am super happy when people buy them, and we've already had a bunch of people add them to their tiers and stuff. I like making the T-shirts ultimately for me because I just really love I try a little bit, at least a little bit with the T-shirts. Like I don't just do it to where it's like, here's merch. Like I want it to be something like I feel okay with wearing. And I really like the Fierce Pet shirt. Like it's got all the animals on it. And then like I really like the logo, how it is basically like the Wildcats logo, and you even have under it the Precise Ecosystemic Tactical Squad.
Yeah, that's how I
yeah,
took it right away. It was the Wildcats.
yeah. Like it, when it came to like making the name for the team and the title on the first page of that story, it was all like me looking back at Wildcats, and then also like doing something with that S instead of Covert Action Team, instead of it being plural, because they never did anything with that S. But
then you want a shirt that if you got a few boxes left over, you can actually wear them and enjoy it.
yeah, exactly. Well, I'm gonna have like both colors for me. I'm gonna at least have a sand for me as well as a pale pink for me. Like I'm really looking forward to having it.
You've got a poster on there as well.
Oh yeah.
And
And there's also various bundles, like as it goes up, like great value bundles. Like you can get Gallows-Man 1, Gallows-Man 2, Tales from Town City #1, all physically, plus all of them are signed, comes with sticker sets from the comics, the scripts, like PDFs of the scripts and stuff for like a good value. And these are some of the different, this right here is our backer giveaways. We've already hit 3. Like every 25 backers we hit basically unlocks a new backer giveaway. Where once the Kickstarter is over, I'll put all the physical backers in like the random wheel generator. I'll spin it and get names from there. We've already hit 3, and we're going to hit 100 backers, so we'll have at least 4 giveaways. And the giveaway is a Gallows Man 1, Gallows Man 2, or Dismay Avenue 1 and 2 sticker and bookmark set from our previous Kickstarters.
And there's another item I saw that was a late edition through Instagram that you posted. I'm going to show the picture here. If you
Oh, yeah, yeah.
if you can kind of talk about this got me more excited than you could ever imagine. Just I love that story. So can you talk about what we're looking at here?
Yeah, so in the story, the first story, Tenfold Hypnotism, it follows the two homeless villains trying to use expired coupons at a convenience store. Like, the coupons are very central to the plot. So about a month and a half ago, I thought of like, why not just like make the coupons and just add them to people's order? Because it cost me barely nothing. Like making it, I made them myself, and then I have printed them at work. Like it really didn't cost me anything. So it was just one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'll just like add those to people's orders. Just like a little thing that's funny because it comes from the comic, and you even see like the fine print below where it's like can only be used at the supermarket in Town City, expires August 14th, 1941. Just these little funny like in comic items. So I was like, yeah, like I'll do it. It cost me nothing really, and I really enjoy it too. So
I was going to let you know that they are expired by a little bit.
yeah, they're expired a
Are
good
they
bit.
though? Where's my tinfoil?
Yeah, yeah.
They're expired a good bit. Plus, you gotta get your multiverse machine and go into a fictional multiverse to use them.
Before we get into the final wrap up here, talking about plugs and where to find you and everything like that, is there any other questions from David or Kirby? Jump in if you had any.
No, while I could sit here all night and talk about Superman, yeah, nothing really. Just some commentary on it. Having read this, I thought it was great. While you don't have to read the Gallows Man stuff to read this, reading it did make me want to read Gallows Man. So it has that effect, which, I mean, that's actually a good thing. Where you can read it, you don't have to read it. That's kind of, I wish a lot more comics would do that, especially like the mainstream, where they're out there, they'll interest you in reading something else, but it doesn't mandate it, like you have to read this to get it. And I think it's really great when people are able to do that and pull that off.
Well, thank you.
Jump over to Kirby.
Now, I assume that you have the comic done before you do the Kickstarter.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Drawn out and stuff, so there's no tears like being drawn into the comic or anything like that we've seen in other Kickstarters.
Yeah, I've thought about doing that eventually, maybe. Like it's something I've considered. Ultimately, it does like add like that personal touch to the comic for those that back it. Currently, I haven't done it yet. Like I don't know. When it comes to making the comics, I like working with the comics, and if I can work that into the story, which would take no time at all, I'm always down. So maybe future comics, but yeah, this comic is completely done to where basically as soon as the Kickstarter's over, it's going straight to the printer.
And I started at the beginning and just checked out a few episodes because I'm kind of a completionist when I look at something, but I checked out Store Brand Comics podcast and I see it ended in 2022 and stuff. Are you going to get back into any type of podcast at all? Or because I really
we actually
dive into restructuring comics, taking storylines and playing with them. It's a fun concept of what you were doing.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun. It's one of those things where like we want to get back into. We even tried getting back into it in July. I'm not not throwing my co-host under the bus. Like he's my best friend. He goes to conventions with me all the time. He's the one that edits them though. And like life has been very busy with him, so he hasn't had the time to actually edit them. So
Yeah, we know how
we're holding off till like he can, like life kind of adjusts itself a little bit to where he has more free time to do that. Once that is a possibility, then we'll get back into doing that. But yeah, even though we don't do it on store brand comics currently anymore, like we will eventually. We still like on car rides, because I mentioned he goes to conventions with me. That's literally what we're doing in the car ride. Like we should probably just set a phone down and just hit record.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's half of our conversations is just pitching original ideas or pitching crossovers between properties and stuff. It's a lot of fun to where like it's not on the Store Brand Comics podcast anymore, but I've kind of worked it with a YouTube channel, Nerdtastic News. Manny from there, I've known him for almost 3 years now. He's a great guy. We just recently started doing like a pitch battle. I won't even say series because we just did one and we're going to do one in like a week or two. But it was basically this past time, like 2 or 3 weeks ago. The thing that sucks is I messed up on my mic audio to where if you listen to it, everyone else sounds great. Mine sounds terrible because I chose the wrong like output thing. But it was basically like pitch a spin-off of a franchise that no one asked for. Like, yes, it's a popular franchise, but no one asked for this spin-off. And mine dealt with like some Harry Potter type stuff. Like there was a few things I pitched, and my buddy Tio dealt with like a One Piece spinoff and stuff with that. But I say all that to say, like, even though it has basically ended in 2022, it still lives on. Sadly, not a lot of people can hear it. It ultimately is just us talking, but maybe eventually it'll come back.
And then one last thing was you mentioned about your liking Clerks and everything, and I'm sure you're as up to date you are with comics and everything. I'm sure you know about it. But the quick stops that
Yeah.
Kevin Smith is doing now, he just brought out volume 2, and I just love how it's going back and attacking the stories that we heard about in there. That was a great
Yeah,
idea.
I'm going to be picking that up. Like, has the volume 1 trade come out yet?
Yeah, there should be
It
a
has?
volume 1, and then volume 2 starts in November.
Next month or 2 months.
Okay. Probably within the next week, I will have already gotten the volume 1 trade. Because I wasn't sure if that was out or not.
Yeah, lots of fun.
Cool. All right. So what we'll do to wrap up is kind of letting the people know where they can find you online, all the different social medias.
Yeah, so you can find me at Dismay Comics. That's DISMAY Comics on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. You can keep up to date with Kickstarter stuff as well as other stuff, other comics I'm working on, other writing projects I'm working on. Keep up to date with that, as well as through this Kickstarter. I have a dumb marketing thing that I started doing that I'll probably keep doing because it somewhat works, where I dress up as Hypno Ray from Tales from Town City. It's fun, dumb. It's a way for like I'm glad people enjoy it, but me creatively, I enjoy doing those little things because it's not just simply here's a picture, like here's what's going on. Like I feel like I'm actually, it's not huge creation, but it's like, here's like a dumb little 20-30 second ad or whatever of Hypno Ray reviewing ketchup or whatever. Yeah. but so yeah, you'll see more of that because ultimately all that stuff costs like less than $40 for me, which worked out perfectly in cosplaying one of my characters. So yeah.
And do you have any upcoming convention appearances for the rest of the year at all?
I've got one more this year, and then I'll start trying to plan and schedule out 2024. But I've got a Pentacon Halloween Fest. It's in Pensacola, Florida. For anyone that's in the Northwest Florida area, October 7th to 8th. I'll be there.
Cool. And yeah, so that's going to do it. We encourage people to check out Tales from Town City, available on Kickstarter for just a couple more days for when this episode will drop. And once again, all the links for what he talked about will be shown on the screen, and then the links for our show will be in the credits afterwards. So we want to just give a giant thank you to Brandon for coming on, and especially for reaching out. We
Thank
haven't
you guys.
had a guest yet, like everyone that we've had for a creator interview in 2023 are ones that we've been following their stuff, and we reached out to them and had connections here and there. But it was a pleasant surprise to see, something show up in the inbox and browse through it and then see the connection with Steve Arena and everything. I'm like, all right, yeah, we'll give this a shot. And yeah, it's
Thank
definitely
you.
good stuff.
Yeah,
So
I'm looking forward to following it all. So
Thank you. Thank you.
So yeah, that is going to do it. Once again, thank you for showing up here at the show. And all there's really left to say is one thing that David has to say. What is that?
That Brandon is a stupid name. You don't even look like a Brandon.
That wasn't
To
it.
be continued.
Thank you, Slimer.